phase 3 of DCS Harmony is to actually use the generated interfaces or translated interfaces in Helios. So at that point, we should be able to have at least a basic interface for every single aircraft that is supported by DCS BIOS, which, as I said, is basically all the aircraft. And and then be able to develop those interfaces further by adding little, adding little improvements to the functions as required. Like if you want the speedometer in knots, then you have to provide a calibration curve to translate between the needle position and the knots. You have to assign the unit to that sort of thing, which we would do in the JSON files. And then from the user perspective, you would just download these JSON files whenever you wanted a new version of the interface, and you wouldn't need a new upgrade. You wouldn't need to change your Helios install or anything. We could even have, and we would, obviously, that's kind of the obvious final state, is that when you download a Helios archive file, a .helios, whatever it is, .helios16 file, where is it? I forgot. What there? .helios16, yeah. That it would include the profile and also the interface definition that you need to make that profile work correctly, so that it's always matched, right? Because if the interface changed and the profile that wouldn't change, that wouldn't work. So yeah, that's pretty much where we're headed. In terms of what I can show for now, I have prototyped it, and I built pretty cool test interface generator. So what you're going to see now has no human no human work, like in the sense that it was just translated from the DCS BIOS files, which obviously were created by a human, but I meant from the Helios team. I didn't do any work on this interface. I just imported it. That was the 24p that I showed you before. Oops, don't want to make a new one. Okay, so we're going to add an interface to Helios like we always do. There's some new exciting options in here based on files I'm testing. So here's one. So I've just added a 24p interface setup, just like always. So it's for the MI24p. And we now find we have a enormous interface. These are all the things that that DCS BIOS knows about this aircraft. So, for example, I mentioned the indicator airspeed. It says to do assign units, set blah blah blah. So that's from the JSON file. It says the airspeed right now is just a number, right? It's just like the needle position, because that's all DCS BIOS knows. And you could build an interface for that. You just have to tie that to the needle position in the profile. But if you wanted it to be nice with like it being knots assigned and stuff, then you would have to go and contribute a little tiny piece of JSON code to the interface definition file. Okay, how do we know this works? Well, that's where another tool that I just created comes in. We have this new in the Helios Developer Tools plugin. We have which is an optional install in Helios. Generate DCS function test profile, and what that does is it just inspects it runs for a while. It's a little slow. It goes through the entire interface and inspects everything that is there and creates what it thinks are appropriate controls. So for example, let's say for the ARC15 thing, so this is if the interface has ARC15 OPs right here. So these are all the things that are in it. There's some, button change, blah, 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 something with multiple positions. And it parses that and tries to figure out what it means and how to best configure it. So it decided here's a push button. Then there is a, it's just, they're not obviously supposed to be pretty. But here's a giant push button, and there's like a volume control, which I think is a type potentiometer. So that means that value was a potentiometer value. Here's a, what is that? A toggle switch, right? And then here's a multi-position rotary switch where it even figured out the names of the positions. So we know that operator arc 15 mode off compass, blah, 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 that this thing has off compass and frame. This frequency dial has a lot of positions. We don't know what they mean. They're actually, numbers, obviously in the 100 kilohertz, but at least you can implement against this, and it has, this piece here is one of those unimplemented things, because I mentioned that in the previous video. Sometimes it finds something in the DCS BIOS interface it can't understand. Like in this case, the value for this frequency is implemented by a Lua callback in DCS BIOS, and so that just gives rise to this empty function. So what you would do is, if you were the person who's maintaining this interface, you would just go in the JSON file and tell it to ignore this one, because we're not going to actually implement it. We don't need it. We're just going to replace both of them together with a new control that I'm about to add to Helios, which is a thumb wheel button. So basically a thumb wheel switch, I think I'm going to call it. But basically the reason this is two things is because, on the it has a value, but it also is like a multi-position switch. So it comes up as two things in DCS BIOS, but this is the kind of thing that you as a expert would then go through and say, okay, well, we don't need that in the interface, it's junk, or we need to write some code to make it work. Some of the other pages, don't have as many problems. Some of them have none. These are just all a bunch of gauges. It just actually just displays values. Some things are really easy. This is just a bunch of indicator lights. They're just green or not green. Gauges here I'm just representing as a numeric text in a numeric text display, because obviously somebody had have to create the art for it, right? But what this does so far is it gives you a pretty darn good starting point. And let's look at something smaller, just so it's more easily, a little bit more wheelie. That's why I'm using the 190 Dora, because it's tiny. The interface is tiny, and we generate the interface for it is like, it's next to nothing. So here's just the telemetry information. Here's pretty much all the cockpit controls. Now, what this does is this is an actual working profile, right? We can we can install it. We can save it. I actually already have one. I'll just go get that one because I don't want to make duplicates. Actually, I do want to make duplicates because I want it to be fresh. So I'm gonna save it over that, just in case something changed on the input. So I've got a profile. I can run that. Never mind the version number. That's not a real version. This is just development stuff. And if I run it, I will get this. I got an interface, and the interface is just panels, right, that I can go to, and I can go here and I can load up the sim, and I can do all these switches, and they all work, and they were all free. And so basically, if you are somebody who's interested in building, master caution, because some of the functions are not implemented, but again, it's work in progress. So, but if you were the expert who's going to make the 190 Dora profile, this is a really good starting point, because you've got all these things that are already working. All you have to do is go in and make the art, right? You just have to make like a pretty bomb fusing selector switch that looks like the real one, and just hook it up. Just hook up the graphics for it. You don't have to go and research how all these things work, right? Except for the few things that are labeled as not being implemented. But see, here is almost nothing. These are actually external aircraft models. That's always Lua. I think I'm going to be able to do this automatically, but in any case, you don't need them. It's like, it's mainly stuff that cockpit builders use to do like cockpit shake and things like that. But here's like a zillion breakers and their reset buttons, and you don't have to do them yourself. So yeah, anyways, that is as far as I've gotten on that. I am attempting to release this. It has a disclaimer on it, so it might change, or I might run out of time. But I'm currently trying to make this an actual Helios release, because I think that would really help the community, because at this point, like, those pre-generated interface files, they would come from me, right? I would just run the DCS Harmony tool and make all these interface files. And so all we need from the community really is somebody to make art and to report switches that don't quite work, and at that point we could have profiles for a lot more planes that don't require Captain Zine to spend, a month or two or however long it takes to go through by hand and figure out 961 switches from Lua. Thank you for your time.